This is the brand new 35mm f1.4 G Master lens from Sony. Let's talk about it. So here are the key points to consider. The lens is 524 grams. It has a minimum focusing distance of 10.6 inches. It features an aperture ring with a D-clicking button for video and a built-in programmable custom function button. Coming in at a price of $13.99 USD, the lens will be available February 2021. All right, so Sony sent this lens over. I spent the full day yesterday playing around with it, shooting photos, shooting video, and I have some thoughts for you. What we're gonna be covering in this video is sharpness, bokeh, autofocus, and form factor, and then I'm gonna leave you with my review. What does it get? What's the number? We're gonna talk about that. But before that, this review is made possible by our sponsor, Storyblocks. All right, guys, so we all know that content is king, and Storyblocks helps bring to life all your stories without sacrificing time, budget, or resources. So we've been using Storyblocks for the last 2 years and having unlimited access to over 1 million digital assets such as illustrations, music, motion graphics, templates, high quality footage means that we can turn our videos from an 8 to a 10 in just a few clicks. No matter where you guys are in your career, head to storyblocks.com/ChrisHowe to check out their flexible subscription plans. I've also put a link in the description below so you don't have to type it all out. You just go whoop and click it. Also, if you guys are part of a larger team or have a marketing agency like we do, Storyblocks has enterprise licensing, which means it covers your back and the company's back to distribute content wherever, whenever you like. So thank you, Storyblocks, for making these reviews possible. Now let's talk about sharpness. All right, first things first, let's get it out of the way. This lens is sharp AF. And AF doesn't stand for autofocus, which we'll get into later. You know what that means. It's a beast. To show you how sharp it is, we're gonna be comparing it to its counterparts, the Zeiss Sony E-mount f1.4 lens, and its other counterpart, the Sigma Art f1.4 35mm lens. Said all those numbers backwards, but you get it. These are the family of 35mm lenses that everyone is considering, and we're gonna compare them all in photos. What's that sound? Let's check out the lens, check out the lens. Sorry, okay, let's look at the sharpness, sorry. All right, so I'm gonna show you 3 photos back to back. Now, these were all shot on the Sony a7 III f1.4 sunny white balance and no other settings change other than swapping the lenses. Now I'm gonna show you all 3 photos. Here's the first one, here's the second one, now here's the third one. Guess which one is the G Master? Pause the video and write a comment right now. 3, 2, 1, pause. All right. The second photo was the G Master, and it is evidently sharper than all the other photos. Now, maybe at a first glance and watching it on a YouTube video, you might be like, they all roughly look the same. So I've also included all the source files for you guys to go pixel peep and everything out. Now you can really start to see where that G Master outperforms when you zoom in. So let's take a look at that first image. This is the Sigma. So let's zoom in on one of these points right here, and you can start to see, all right, well, that looks pretty good. We have a little bit of chromatic aberration here. It's a little green along this bar. Let's zoom in on the G Master in the exact same spot and start to do a side by side. You can see that chromatic aberration below that bar is much, much less. Oh yeah, that second image is much sharper. Now let's compare that to the Zeiss equivalent. There is some serious chromatic aberration going on here. Look at right there. The green and the purple are just crazy. Now when you compare that to the G Master, just a really clean image. You still got a tiny bit of chromatic aberration, but definitely not nearly as bad as the Zeiss. And then let's take a quick look at the Sigma right there. Not as bad, but that purple is a little bit more prominent there. So this is the Sigma, this here is the G Master, and this here is the Zeiss. One of the things I did want to note too that I found interesting is that the Zeiss was always a little bit more green. So when you look through all the different images, they all have a slightly different color cast in them. And I would say that the G Master lens has the most true color tone in my opinion. As you can see, this 35mm f1.4 is as sharp as a Japanese kitchen knife. Moving on. So next up is form factor. Let's start with the weight. The G Master comes in at approximately 530 grams. The Zeiss comes in at approximately 640 grams, and the Sigma comes in at approximately 700 grams. Moving on to the size, here's each lens side by side. As you can see, the G Master is the most compact. And that's what I love most about this lens, its compact size and its weight. And as someone who carries a lot of camera gear around, every ounce counts. Also, because of its size, it makes me want to use it more, and that's the whole goal of being a photographer, is to take photos. Now, it is made out of plastic, you can hear right there, but it's definitely one of the higher quality and professional grade plastics. So one of the things I love about this lens is it does have a new nano AR coating on the front element here. Now, what does that do? It actually suppresses internal reflection and helps minimize flares and ghosting. This means that you get a cleaner image when you take a photo. It also helps to resist any nasty materials that might get on the lens, like dust and moisture. Now, I just talked about dust and moisture. The nice thing about this is that it's weather sealed. Obviously, you can't be going and dunking this thing into water. This is if it's drizzling or it's raining, you know you can still go and take photos. Now, on the side of the lens, there's a programmable function button, which means that once you connect this lens to your camera, it can start talking to it. So you can switch this in your settings to do whatever you want it to do. I like to keep it on focus lock. And one of my favorite features about this lens is that you can actually change the aperture on the outside. Now, right now it's on the clicked mode, which means that you have haptic feedback when you're changing your f-stop. But it also has a declicking button right here, so you can turn that off. And when you're shooting video, now it's nice and smooth. And the last important note in terms of form factor is the thread side is a 67mm thread. So if you have different ND filters or polarizing filters, just make sure you're accommodating with step-up rings or buying the filters that you need. All right, now on to autofocus. Now this lens has two built-in internal focusing motors, which means it is very fast when it comes to focusing. Here's a quick test of the video capabilities when it comes to autofocus on the fastest focus settings. And here's an example of how fast it will grab my face when shooting photos in single shot autofocus. So Sony is claiming to have very, very silent motors. I thought we would do a test, an ASMR test together. So let's bring the mic in. Can you hear anything? I can just hear the computers in the background. Can I even hear it like this? It's literally like this. It's so faint. It's like. So Sony, your silent motors are very silent. Now, after using this lens in the field, I would say that its bokeh is very creamy. It's very beautiful. All those other words that people use to describe a good quality lens. It looks good. One of the things that people like to do when they do camera tests to see how the bokeh looks is they look at bokeh balls. So we're gonna take a quick look at some different bokeh balls between the three lenses, starting off with the G Master. Let's zoom in on this beautiful photo of Lucas standing in front of some Christmas lights here. And we're gonna zoom in on that bokeh. That's a nice bokeh ball. There's not too much artifacting happening. Artifacting? There's no artifacts. It looks good. Now moving on to our Zeiss, when we zoom in on that bokeh ball, you can start to see some artifacts. We have little dots here and there, and there's actually some pretty solid green ghosting going on, some more chromatic aberration like we saw in the other images. And our last image is the Sigma. Now, as you can see, this shape is slightly different. It looks more like a lemon. This is all based on the different blades that are in the lens. Now, this is an 11 blade aperture, which produces a more cylindrical bokeh ball and also just produces generally nice looking bokeh. So I would say the 35mm lens, in terms of bokeh, looks great. All right, final thoughts. 35mm G Master. I like it. I like it a lot. After using it for a day, I want to have this in my camera bag. Now this would get a 9 out of 10 for me in terms of a review. And the only reason it gets a 9 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10 is that G Master pricing. $13.99 for lens is very steep, but we all know what we're paying for. Paying for a G Master lens, which means it is the best of the best. It's the industry standard when it comes to Sony. That also means that you're paying for R&D, manufacturing, good glass, and everything else that comes with being a working professional and using the best gear. Now, if you guys are in the market for a 35mm portrait lens, which you most likely are if you're clicking on this video, it all depends on your budget and where you are in your career. Now, the 35mm G Master is meant for working professionals. If you do commercial work, client work, portraiture, journalism, or anything like that, you want to use the best gear, and this is the best gear. So you're gonna be paying for that. But if you're more of an intermediate or beginner photographer and you wanna get your first prime lens, start getting some of those crispy portrait shots, well, I would actually recommend that you get the $700 Sigma, which is half the price. This is still an amazing lens. I would still recommend this lens, but when you start to look at chromatic aberration and sharpness and all those other things, what do I want? I'd be willing to spend the extra $700 to have the best quality because I am working with commercial clients and I want to make sure that it's the best possible image I can get with the gear that's available in the world. Now, as for the Zeiss, which I currently do own, I will most likely be selling it. The reasons why is because this lens is actually $200 more than the G Master pricing, coming in at actually $1599. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see this lens phased out of manufacturing in the next little while, and this is gonna be the king of the 35 f1.4 when it comes to E-mount. So this is going to be the new 35 that's in my bag. If you guys are interested in learning more about the 35mm G Master, I'll leave my affiliate links in the description below. We're at the end of our review right now, so please press like. There's a lot of time that go into these reviews, so a like, just a little click, means the world to us. Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified for future videos. And as always, on most videos, ASMR outro time. Let's bring her in, boys. I'm like a talk show host. Come on down. Do you guys like reviews? Do you want me to do more reviews on this channel? Are you interested? Please give me some actual constructive feedback. I've really enjoyed doing reviews and I want to continue making more. Could I be doing anything better? Why am I like quietly yelling? It's very strange and awkward, but that's the ASMR outro. Always gotta be awkward. Bye. I don't want to put this down and disrupt your sleep if you're watching.